Steven and Larry, and we're talking Swish.
Welcome everyone, Talking Swish interview segment. We have a Magic player who has been a guest on the show beforehand. We spent a couple hours talking about taxes a few months ago. I think it was back in September, give or take. My memory all blends at this point. But please welcome back Chase Masters. Chase, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's good to be back. How are y'all doing?
You know, living life. Steven didn't play this weekend, but I qualified last night for the SCG event for tomorrow. A buddy of ours didn't make it. He ended up losing to some teamer decks when he was on Sultai today. And I know you, for example, are pretty knowledgeable on the Sultai deck recently. You've done well in an SCG satellite. In addition, you took down the first you took it down the Insight event on Wednesday, correct?
Yes, indeed. I was one of two people to go undefeated.
Yeah, their new little IQs, I guess, is a good comparison for them. Their little qualifiers for their little invitational they're doing. Well, don't want to say little, but because it has a lot of monetary gain to be playing for.
I think it's a $5,000 tournament for like 36-ish people is going to be the number qualified.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that's a good ratio. Like, everybody should be able to have a good fighting chance, especially if it's only 36 players for a 5K. That's insane.
And how do you qualify
some
for that?
Hard hitters in there. You have to either place in the top 16 of one of their opens, one of which is coming up next weekend. It's a $15 entry 5K, so pretty good value for everybody.
It's not too bad, yeah.
Isn't that one in April?
I don't believe so. I believe that they bumped the pricing of... Oh, maybe that one is in April. There's another tournament to qualify you next weekend on the 20th.
Okay.
Yep, the little weeklies. And they're single elimination, correct? Because I know I've seen a few people in the Discord, because for some reason I get every notification from the Insight channel that one or two people were a little disheartened that they didn't have a pairing for round 2 after they lost round 1. I guess not used to this.
They are a single elimination. Reminds me of the PTQs you used to play at GPs where you gotta 5-0 to top 8 and then you gotta win 3 more.
Yeah, those 5-0 to top 8. I remember a PTQ that I lost my winning for in Vegas back when they first brought PTQs back to Grand Prix. I ended up having to do that because they were like in 8 different pods. So you were in like 8 different areas, and then everybody that had the best record in each of those 8 brackets would pretty much make it to the top 8. It was a weird system. They had no plan for it, and it ain't much different. Now you go X1 in a PTQ and still not make them top 8 or anything, so you still leave with the feel bads. But that is a fair comparison. It's just like the CFB Pro event they did today. They've been doing those single elimination for the last year, I want to say. So it's not much different than those.
Yeah, I remember one of those PTQs at a GP. I'd scrubbed out. I was feeling kind of dejected. I asked around the room, anybody got a standard deck that I can play? And Grand Prix Richmond champion Alex Hahn came through clutch for me and said, yeah, I got a deck that you can use, but you'll need to buy Vivian's. And I was like, sure. I have like 5 minutes before the tournament starts. The deck is not sleeved. I need to buy Vivian's. It's a mess. I have not written a deck list. But I somehow, by some miracle, managed to get it sleeved and got the deck list written down. And I went to the vendor and I was like, I need 4 Vivian's. Naturally, they thought this meant Vivian Reed.
Oh,
nope.
God.
It was the 4-mana Vivian that I needed because it was a Hadana's Climb deck. I didn't know this. I didn't know what was in the deck. Other than that, it was like a blue-green creature deck.
I remember the Climb deck.
Yeah, deck was real good. You know how good the deck was? I top-8'd that tournament with the wrong Vivians in my deck.
That's nice.
Hey, to be fair, Vivian Reed's pretty powerful, so I can see you getting away with it.
Well, I got paired against Esper Control, and 4 main deck Vivian Reed is pretty good against Esper Control.
You ain't lying. If I'm playing Esper Control and you play Vivian Reed, I'm gonna be like, what in the hell is this
Right,
bullshit?
Turn 2, I play Steel Leaf Champion, and then like turn 3, Shifting Ceratops. Turn 4, Vivian. You just can't win.
As the Esper opponent, I'm probably going to die. Like, Shifting Ceratops alone was a nightmare. Card was really annoying.
That deck actually, wait, no, it didn't get to play Shifting Ceratops. Shifting Ceratops came out later. It did play Shifting Ceratops, but no, in the main deck there were 4 copies of Vine Mare.
Oh Jesus! Oh
4
yeah.
Vine Mare.
Jeez, you just don't want your opponent to have a good time.
Why would I want my opponent to have a good time playing Magic?
I don't know. I don't play those degenerate decks like that. I like to play decks that are fun and fair, that both players get to enjoy themselves, such as the very big hits like Dredge. You know, we're all just trying to have a good time.
Both teams tried hard.
Both teams did try hard. So you went and did well in the Insight event, and then we were talking briefly before we got on the cast together about you went 6-0. That means you were awarded 2 buys for the event tomorrow. In addition, if you weren't already qualified, you get qualified for the arena qualifier next month for, what is this, at Strixhaven? Is that the one that we're going to be working towards?
Looks like it.
Yeah. So that's going to be in April. So your Sultai list, tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I've sort of played all the decks in Standard. I've found that most of them were kind of underwhelming and created a rock, paper, scissors type feel that I just wasn't enjoying very much.
Mm-hmm.
This was after I had really enjoyed the Rakdos Sacrifice deck that I think it was Felipa Carolla had 6-0'd an event with earlier in February.
Okay.
Just because it was a deck that rewarded you for understanding the dynamics of a game of Magic, particularly how to create massive tempo swings and abuse your opponent on mana expenditure. And most of the decks in Standard are kind of clunky in the fact that they are not really built to spend all of their mana every turn doing the best thing possible. I think this is exemplified by the fact that Lovestruck Beast is kind of one of the best cards in Standard, and if you kill the 1/1, then they spent 4 mana for a 5/5 blocker, and it turns out that if you don't try to attack your opponent just spent 4 mana for something that you get to answer for basically free. And that kind of interaction made me think that I just wanted to be doing something where my opponents were going to have to play on my terms, and the games were going to be not necessarily linear, but it was convergent decision streams where you play a game to a point where you stabilize, and then your opponent has to play your game, and your game is way over the top of what they're doing. And I mean, this is a big departure from every kind of deck that I've liked playing before, but I think it acknowledges maybe the most important part of modern Magic, which is the ability to spend more mana than your opponent, because there's no real such thing as low resource Magic unless you kill your opponent blisteringly fast. Like, if you kill your opponent on your turn 4 before they get a turn 4, that is low resource Magic, because your opponent literally didn't have the time to deploy their cards. Other than that, all the decks can play well into the late game and have cards that scale as far as the game goes, mana-wise, and in giving you extra cards. More things play like Planeswalkers today than ever before.
That I'll agree with. It's mainly because things have been pushed so much, so they do feel like Planeswalker level strength. How aggro is getting 2-for-1 cards in the adventures, so
Well, why is there a 2/2 haste that attacks to draw a card?
Yeah.
Like-
yeah.
Robert the Rich is a. I think that card annoys me more than Embercleave. Because you know how many times we need to hit lands, and it hits a land every time, and then we get the non-land? Oh, I hate that card. Why does it have reach? Like, randomly has reach.
Because it's Robin Hood, right? And he's an archer. Because he's randomly an archer. And, you know, every archer has reach in Magic.
One of my sweetest wins with that Rakdos deck was somebody had like a 15/15 core of old and didn't realize I could block with a robber and attacked and then died.
That is dirty.
Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous.
Oh, I've died because I forget it has reach. Because it's 95% of the time it has no relevant text.
Yeah,
about
I'm going to
that.
be honest. The only reason I did remember it had reach and block is because Arena prompted me to block. And I was like, wait, why? Oh, this has reach. Okay,
Wait,
block.
red creatures have reach?
Yeah.
What?
It's so silly. But what were you going to say before we got into our tirade about Robert the Rich?
I mean, given that all these cards are really good at scaling and letting you play with more cards than normally would be expected, I would argue that card advantage is probably the least important it's ever been because, well, every card inherently gives you advantage, so you have to look for other places to get a consistent edge. And you saw for a while mono red dominating because they went really under everybody. They never let their opponents stabilize, and some of the powerful catch-up mechanisms that you saw, like Shadow's Verdict, just weren't cutting it when that was the only thing and people were playing like counter spells and focusing on the wrong aspect of the game. They were relying on their opponent to give them opportunities to spend mana when they should be creating those themselves, and if those ways happen to be proactive forms of interaction, even better. But the Sultai deck, it's sort of evolved over time. I remember that Logan Nettles, Jabberwocky, was sort of the first person to show up with a variation of the deck. And then Michael Bunda picked it up. And I played against Michael Bunda in round 8 of the PTQ that I 7-2'd, I think. Or maybe no, I didn't 7-2 that one. I 6-3'd that one.
Yeah, you 7-2'd the one when you played Snow White.
Yeah, I was playing Rakdos at the time that I played against Michael, and Michael's an incredible player, but the deck had some real weaknesses at that time, and it just felt like, wow, whenever my opponent casts Emergent Ultimatum, I just lose. And I think people were looking for ways to make Emergent Ultimatum extra broken when the card was released. Like, how do I instantly win deterministically? When, if you can just remove all your opponent's decision equity, they probably just die anyways. You don't have to play bad cards to facilitate a combo. You can play reasonable and high-powered cards. And the big benefit is, like, you pay 7 mana and you get 13 or 14 mana worth of spells most of the time. And mana doubling is really broken. Like, the reason that Moxen are broken is not really because they give you mana. It's because they give you more mana than your opponent could possibly spend before your opponent gets a chance to spend that amount of mana, right? Because if both players have, like, I don't know, 15 lands in play, which happens sometimes, the game's still pretty balanced because there's not a huge difference in the amount of mana that each player is spending. But whenever you have cards like Wolf Willow Haven and Cultivate and Binding the Old Gods that are just ramp spells that then have separate utility. I mean, Cultivate replacing itself means that it's a ramp spell that doesn't cost you a card, which is the valuable part of it.
Oh,
But
there.
I mean, binding the old gods in so many of these matchups is just entwined reap and sow for 4 mana that also can just kill whatever your opponent's best permanent is.
Yeah, Binding of the Old Gods is actually starting to make argument for being my favorite saga. Like, ever. It's just such a sweet card. And then putting it over the top, since we've been playing on Arena, them making it uncommon for us so we don't have to spend rare wild cards on a card like that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, Herald Unites the Elves is not quite so good as Binding the Old Gods.
no.
No.
Even though I'm about to be making a brew up with that one as well and some green-black historic elves. But that's something for another day.
I mean, I guess they also looked at it and they're like, oh, this card's just Death Sprout. And Death Sprout wasn't uncommon.
Yeah.
The card's so much better than Death Sprout.
Mm-hmm.
This card is cause didn't Death Sprout grab you a basic land?
I believe so.
It did.
This one, the Death Touch. Let's be real. The Death Touch is the mode that is ignorable. It has moments, but being able to grab your, I don't know the triumph names by heart, so I'm gonna call it the red.
Ketria.
Yeah.
Ketria is the teamer one that you usually
Yeah.
grab so that you can cast Tibble. But
Yeah, that's
Zagoth is the other
that's
one.
the one. Like being able to grab your red source so you can be able to cast your Tibolts out of Sultai is just it's sick.
Or like when we were playing green black, being able to get the white source for the Mythos in
Yep.
a 2-color deck, like totally for free.
Yeah, we're playing the Black Mythos and Golgari, and we randomly have the white sources because of the triumphs that we can get the full ability out of the Mythos. Because honestly, destroying non-creature permanents was very relevant in this format. It's a very heavy permanent format right now.
Oh, for sure. I mean, as highlighted probably most by Lovestruck Beast. Like, that is the most, we're going to put a bunch of permanents into play, and both of us have to build a board kind of card.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, I'm saying kind of like is wrong. It's kind of similar to Beast. It's like, this is what can you do that's better or you're going to die. Like, that's how I feel like it's a one-up contest on your boards right now.
I mean, that comes back to the mana. You know, the decks that are at the very top are there not because of some astounding level of efficiency. And I think the adventure cards actually demonstrate a regression from the efficiency first model. And it's just, how can I build my deck and play my deck so that I'm consistently spending more mana than you? And mono red and mono white, they're trying to reduce the number of turns that their opponent has, which constricts their opponent's ability to spend mana. But there's also cards like Raydane, and I would say that Embercleave also forces the opponent not to spend mana, because you just die if the Embercleave comes down and you spent your mana doing something that was irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Embercleave punishes so hard. God.
Oh, absolutely.
I honestly think in red decks, I am more annoyed by the Embercleave era than the Hazoret era. That's where I'm at right now because of Embercleave.
Yeah.
And it helps they've had Bone Crusher Giant and all that to complement. Hell, Chase, I think the first time we played, it wasn't like, I don't think you were an Embercleave deck, but you're playing like that mono one-drop red deck on Arena when we're doing, I think it was the CFB
Cavalcade.
Yeah, those CFB events, those little
Yeah.
like the PT qualifiers or whatever the hell they were called.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed.
Whatever the PT was called at that time, they've changed the name about 65 times in the last year and a half.
I mean, they had to take a bunch of prize money out of the pool and strip people of their invites, right? So, you know, had to change the name.
They had no other choice but to do that. You know, the overhead cost of running online Magic from your home and your boxers is excessive right now. It's crazy.
Wait. And you're telling me that you can give these players non-fungible tokens? My word.
And then on top of it, people like me had the nerve to be upset that Magic didn't want to waste money printing cards for people to do this sealed event today. Instead, they had to do it in Phantom because they didn't want to kill the trees to give people these cards on Arena.
Yep.
Oh,
Couldn't give them 6-packs, right? Like they ground for hours.
They
and
figured
hours.
California lost enough trees this year.
oh, not on top. On top of that, people like myself had to unregister from a satellite yesterday because of how bad their patch was for the historic anthology. So I missed the SCG event that I was originally going to do, and I had to stay up till 3 in the morning to do one.
God.
Oh yeah, I lost a match because it just like booted me to the home screen randomly in the middle of a combat.
What the hell?
Yo, that would make me so mad. Like, well, Steven has seen firsthand on how I react when it comes down to Arena costing me a match. Back when I didn't have the best experience. Also, Arena wasn't ready for competitive tournaments at the beginning of the pandemic, and back when they were doing those CFB PT qualifiers or whatever they, like I said, I still don't know what they were called, but we were doing those, and I had Arena just like not give me a fighting chance because you get booted and it just wouldn't load up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I quit playing Arena for a long time simply because even though I had, you know, very good internet speed and good connection, it would randomly kick me out while I was playing ladder games.
Yeah.
And like, just losing that amount of time created a trade-off that was not worth it to me.
Yep, and it's very
And
frustrating.
I'm so lucky that these SCG Tour events give out invites to the end of the month things, because I would not be qualified for them because I do not have the time to grind the ladder.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've talked to Steven, I've talked to Dewey, I've talked to many people about this. I'm not grinding that 1200 thing. I'm just not doing it. I see how people's like gotta make sure my ranking don't. I don't have time to spend the whole last day looking at this like, oh, I'm at like 1150. I probably should play one game so I could try to make sure I'm locked. Oh, I lost that game. Oh God, now I got stress level out the wazoo added to this. Magic should not be stressful like that. That is not how it should be.
It also shouldn't be obscured in the same way, right? Like, they don't give you a formula for
exactly. I
how
was just
your
about to
ratings
say
up
that.
and down.
They don't tell you. We all have our suspicions, our thoughts. We have created our own logic. Be like, okay, if we win like 5 in a row, it's calculating that. We don't know that as fact. They don't tell us these things. They're just sitting there in the office counting their money right now, laughing like, oh, these idiots.
Did you have fun in your match? Smiley face, sad face.
That
Yeah.
is the funnest thing. I love it when
Yeah.
I'm streaming and that pops up and I'm like, oh, y'all know what this is. Sad.
Sad face.
You like they will never be like, oh, tell us more or tell us why. No, they don't want to know. They already know. Like,
I mean, one thing regarding that kind of grind as well, like, I remember the first month that I came back and decided, like, I'm going to grind this, I'm interested in it. I got up to, like, 570 constructed rank. I just stayed up until, like, 3 a.m. the night before the reset.
Yeah.
I figured 570 at 3 a.m. should be safe.
It wasn't.
oh no.
Nope. Absolutely not.
Yep.
Like, it should normally be safe, but it was not.
Was this during like the heat of the pandemic?
It was in, like, November, I think.
Oh,
It was just
November.
really frustrating.
Yeah, I'd be frustrated for that, like in November. I was thinking you were gonna say this was back in like May or something like that, because then I'd be like, because I think that was when like we started to get like the gist of the pandemic, I guess you could say, when it was all starting to set in and everybody was starting to do the online thing. Back when the stores were out of game systems and webcams and all that good stuff. But November's wild. Usually that time is getting a little slower because of the holidays too. That's wild. I've never put myself in that position, so I don't know how quick it falls. So I couldn't tell you. I take your word on it, of course. And I've heard people say similar things to that they would go have a high ranking, and then the next day, boom, it's gone. Like, I'm in the thousands, I'm good. Like, 6 hours later, you are at 98%. Like, ain't this about a pain?
In fairness, I didn't play terribly many matches to get up to that ranking, and it probably was based more off of my win percentage, so adjusted, people probably get points for simply playing a greater bulk of matches, even if their win percentage is lower. It's just the aggregate number of wins stacking up, meaning something.
It's possible.
I doubt we'll ever be told the full story.
No, it does better. I will say the one good thing that's coming, because if I'm going to give Arena and them hell, I'm going to have to give credit, or where I believe credit is due. It's not really credit, but it's more like thank you are finally getting in the right direction, and that's they're be doing deck sharing is going to be coming sometime this year.
Oh, I had not heard that.
Yeah,
but speaking of deck sharing, I'm very happy that with all of these satellites, and you've got the Mythic Society weekly events, and you've got some number of like Channel Fireball Showdown, CFB Pro Showdown, and other such events, you're getting closer to like the Magic Online massive deck dump levels of information, and it actually creates what I think is a much better standard format than we've seen in a very long time. I really enjoy this standard format.
Yeah, it also helps that we don't have anything busted worthy of needing to be banned. That's helped. But no, I agree. Magic is evolving so quick, so let's stop for a second and talk about that. Look at Standard at the beginning. Like, Sultai was a deck everyone was talking about. Then Aggro was like, no. And then for the couple weeks, Aggro was like the talk deck. Then we had one in the last week or two. It's like these Toski decks were like the big talk, whether it be Naya, then we had like the Naya Fury and stuff. Now, come to this week, where Sultai and Team are probably battling for that top spot right now.
I've got a hot take for the day, which is that Teamer is the most unbelievably overrated deck, because when it wins big, and people care about, quote, having game against everything. Yes, you have counter spells, and you have Bone Crusher Giant, you have a lot of ways to gum up the ground, and you have cards like Goldspan and Alrund's Epiphany that can give you the massive tempo swings that you need to be able to like consistently generate an advantage. But the deck is a pile of cards that, if you start to draw like a little bit subpar, it just falls apart as a relatively incoherent pile, because the adventure cards are all kind of designed to be like a little bit below rate on efficiency, but above rate on ability to continue spending mana. And if you're in a situation where you have awkward tap lands, that's not very good. And if you're in the position where you're just playing adventure creatures, like your 3-mana 3/1 Flash Flyer, kind of below rate, your 3-mana 4/3, like about at rate, and you're just going to get beaten by these slightly better cards that your opponents are playing, because efficiency is an entirely relative metric. And if your Goldspan Dragon gets answered for 2 mana, it's pretty much as bad as if like you played a Baneslayer Angel and it got Doombladed. And the same goes for all the other big tempo interactions. It's just that if you land a Goldspan Dragon uncontested, the mana advantage it gives you probably does give you a free win. And like, I played the Teamer deck. I've watched my friends play the Teamer deck. We've talked out a lot of lines. You know, we were doing that in between rounds today. One of my buddies was just laddering with the Teamer deck, trying to learn it. And it felt like you had a huge amount of agency in your games, but a lot of the percentage points that you were getting were just based off of the fact that your opponent had no clue how to play against your deck. And the same thing I think was true initially for the Sultai deck, and certainly it was true for the like Naya Fury deck, and now kind of the Mardu Fury deck, which is the spiritual descendant of it.
Yeah, for the most part.
just because people aren't prepared for like, yeah, here's 8 hasty damage with protection out of nowhere, and if you try to interact with it, it gives me back mana.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that kind of thing, like it bothers me because I don't think that it's like giving decks a fair shake to say like people don't understand how to play against high resource decks from a strategic standpoint, therefore the high resource deck is good. I think that that's kind of like saying, well, the 46 defense in football worked for the 1985 Chicago Bears because people hadn't figured out that you could spread the field wide and put fast wide receivers and just get the ball out before they ever hit you and just score infinite touchdowns. Right? If you played the 46 defense in today's NFL, you would get blown out in every game. Because rushing the passer really, if that's the only thing you're doing, is a terrible plan. It's in many ways the same thing. Like you're playing a high resource deck. How do you beat high resource decks? You invalidate their resources in some way by saying like, I spent more mana than you, or I have Ugin the Spirit Dragon. It doesn't matter how many permanents you have, they all have a color, they're all gone. And that's the kind of thing that, you know, is not so good about the teamer deck, is that it doesn't actually prevent your opponent from making decisions. The deck has lots of points where you can interact, but it never stops your opponent from making decisions.
Okay, I can respect that opinion on it. Because I haven't played the teamer deck myself. I have played against the teamer deck, and I don't know. I want to know your opinion on this. You've done well with Sultai this week. Who do you think's favored in that matchup?
I feel like it's kind of coin flippy. The better player is probably favored because it's a very positioning intensive match. And what I mean is like the better player within the context of the matchup, because there are certain weird things like you got people running around with these Great Henges in their teamer deck, and the Great Henge is known for giving a lot of free wins because it just draws you a bunch of cards and gives you more mana and more ways to spend mana than your opponent.
True.
Right, but the life is irrelevant against Sultai. It's not the way that you're dying, realistically. So you're supposed to cut them because when your Sultai opponent's playing cards like Binding the Old Gods or Wraths, the Great Henge is going to be a 9-mana artifact that's stuck in your hand. So it's about which cards are relevant. Like, you can actually just let Edgewall Innkeeper kind of sit and play sometimes because it doesn't deal a relevant amount of damage to you. Whereas you kind of have to answer things like Kazandu Mammoth because they, like, here's a 5-ball, and you're not dying because your opponent's spending more mana than you naturally. You're dying because your opponent's spending more mana than you in a constricted time frame. So as long as you play to extend that time frame, all of your cards beat all of their cards on like rate level. Like your Heartless Acts line up really well against their Brazen Borrowers or Goldspan Dragons. Your Binding the Old Gods is the same way. And then you have like Sweepers, and the only creature that costs more than 3 in the deck is Goldspan Dragon. So you've got these like Wraths that just play massive cleanup duty, and your opponent's given this horrible choice of, do I play one threat and lose to the spot removal spell, or do I play multiple threats and lose to the Wrath? And that kind of balance and understanding how to navigate those games where your deck is gonna be trying to 1-for-1 with a deck that's trying to always pack a bit of advantage onto that 1-for-1. So, I mean, I like my matchup as a Sultai player versus the teamer deck, but I also understand why a lot of people dislike the matchup. And when I say I like the matchup, I think that it has a lot of play to it. And I think that getting into that sort of sideboarding space of lining up your cards so that they do interact favorably with what your opponent's doing is where the matchup is won and lost. Like, you're not dying to random draft statted creatures, if that makes sense. So where you're dying is when they do get that mana advantage on you. So if you play to avoid your opponent getting a mana advantage, you'll win. If you play it as like, I'm gonna kill my opponent's things in the quote-unquote most efficient way, that's where you start to lose. Players are hyper-focused on the idea that they have to interact in the most efficient way possible at all times. And that's just not something that you have to do unless you're playing against a deck like Mono Red.
True. I do think Mono Red's probably the best aggro deck that's running around.
I actually think Mono White's better, but
I'm talking about, I don't know, when I played Sultai decks like that, I thought Mono White was a way easier matchup than Mono Red was, like, every time.
I think both of the aggro decks are favorable matchups for Sultai. Like, the tempo deck, the Mono Blue tempo deck is kind of the hard matchup for Sultai because
Oh, I bet. Yeah. No,
when you're, right, so you're trying to interact in the way that, like, I'm going to spend more mana than you,
Mm-hmm.
and in the process of spending more mana than you, my cards are going to be equivalent on rate to yours as far as how quote-unquote efficient for the mana they are. The problem is they get to play a Delver game and they just like they stick a threat and then they get to protect it and you're forced to answer it in a tempo negative way and then they stick another threat. And there are very few things that they actually have to counter from you.
Right.
And that's kind of the space where you start to lose is whenever you are forced to play your opponent's game, right? Mono Red's really good when it forces you to bend over backwards so that you don't die to the onslaught of aggression.
Mm-hmm.
If your cards up and down the curve just kind of say, for instance, like from the Sultai deck, if you either play a removal spell on 2 or a Wolfwillow Haven on 2, and then on 3, right, so 2 and 3, you want to play a removal spell and a ramp spell. It doesn't really matter which order you play them in against the Mono Red deck, because what you're trying to do is prevent yourself from being thrust too far on the back foot. And then it's very easy for you to stabilize because your cards are like a half step bigger than your opponent's, and it's the traditional, you want to be a little bit bigger than your opponent in what you're doing. And that's the place where people get real mixed up. Like, Mono White, I think, is a better aggro deck right now because its cards are harder to interact with, and therefore you can't generate massive amounts of tempo on them without a card like Extinction Event or like Alron's Epiphany or Shadow's Verdict, and they have Raydane to punish you for playing those expensive cards.
Yeah, Raydane is pretty good. I'm not gonna argue that Raydane is
It's also
to
just
be
like so
blunt.
sick against the Squirrel deck. Like, I'm just gonna play this shield. Good luck hitting me.
Yeah, playing the shield against Toski decks is pretty annoying too.
Speaking of the Toski decks, I like another hot take. I think that Showdown of the Scalds is one of the most overrated cards in Standard, because when Showdown of the Scalds is impressive, it's extremely impressive, and when Showdown of the Scalds is not impressive, you paid 4 mana and probably spent an entire turn to not affect the board in a meaningful way. And it generates quote-unquote card advantage, but it doesn't give you the decision of what to do with your mana during the turn that you're going to cast those cards, because either you cast them or you lose them.
It's one of those high variance, high reward style cards in a way. It's no different.
I think
It's we actually had the conversation earlier. It is actually really close to Escape to the Wilds. When that was the card. Obviously, you don't get the land, but you also get it for 1 mana cheaper. Steven made a point earlier, which that is actually worth the mana that you don't get to play extra because you're getting to play that card a turn early. And then you also get the counters, so that's actually like a spell in itself.
Yep.
I actually think the counters are probably the part of the card that is better than the drawing cards. Like
that might be true because especially with Clarion Spirit, you making like those flying spirit. I have died to those alone. Like they made a couple of them in the 3/3s because they played a couple spells in the next few turns, and then they got out of my range where I couldn't really like answer both tokens. And having to use your resources out your hand on tokens that just came off of a permit they have in play that because you obviously want to get rid of the actual Clarion Spirit, not the actual tokens that it made. But if you have to use your resources on that, those are eventually going to replace themselves for pretty much free because they're going to play those spells regardless.
Yeah,
So,
and another thing is, in the talk about efficiency, playing a 4-mana draw spell is not particularly efficient if it doesn't like truly draw all the cards, and it needs the thing on the back end to rebate some of that efficiency. It's like to the point that you see Gem Razor popping up in Gruul and Naya decks. And it's just, yeah, I'm going to mutate onto this and I'm going to destroy your Showdown of the Scouts that has already drawn you cards. And it's like, it's good enough because the amount of cards that your opponent has is far less relevant than the way that the cards they have force you to spend your mana. Like the Showdown of the Scouts is really good because it forces your opponent to do a specific thing sometimes, not necessarily because it just draws cards, because you're playing your mono white deck that has Luris in it, and you saw people splashing red for Bone Crusher Giant and Showdown of the Scouts, and it's like, this deck already wasn't running out of things to do with its mana, so why are you playing this card?
are you talking about like in the Naya decks?
So
Boros,
before the Night X, there was Boros aggro, and it was.
Oh yeah, I thought that's a little. I don't think you necessarily needed all that because honestly, mono red. That's pretty much mono red splash and white for the showdowns. I think at that point,
it's mono white splashing red for the showdowns, and then there was the fully hybrid version that was just like, I'm gonna play all of the best
the Kowalski
white and
build.
red cards. Yeah.
So like what Kowalski was doing. Yeah, I played that list in a couple events. And it felt
you ran out of things to do with your mana without the Scalds either. Like,
yeah,
I didn't understand it. Right? You've got all these adventure creatures in Standard, so those give you infinite ways to spend your mana. And then if you have Luris, that gives you ways to spend your mana. Maul the Skyclaves, a way to dump your mana. Faceless Haven, that's a way to dump your mana. The Castles, that's a way to dump your mana. These Foretell cards, another way to dump your mana. Not really present in the aggro decks, but just something to consider.
right.
It's not as though there's a shortage of ways that players can continue playing the game. Legion Angel, another example. Like, here's a 4/3 that draws another 4-mana 4/3 for me to play every turn.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that is a pretty good card that just generates increments of advantage because it just being able to immediately replace itself, so you're not losing cards in hand. You're just and then especially so you're playing that card, you play it for 4 mana. You draw a new one out your sideboard, put it into your hand. Then you're drawing a card for a turn. If it's not a land, then it's a spell that you're probably not going to play yet because you're going to just play another angel, put it back in your hand. So now you're gaining more resources to play throughout the game later. Once you're done going on the angel train, if that's what you're going to stick to, and then it's all based on your board situation, of course.
Right, but if you don't have a quick clock, right, which the aggro decks do have, but if you don't have a quick clock, then these angels that you're spending 4 mana for, right, if you are stuck with four lands in play for, turn 4 to turn 8, your quote-unquote 4 mana angel that you're playing on turn 7 is really a 7 mana angel And whatever your opponent's 7-mana play is probably better than it.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the thing with the way that Magic has been designed. It's designed for both players to be able to quote-unquote do their deck's thing now, which usually involves making a large number of permanents and having a bunch of like sort of big mid-rangey mana dumps is, I guess, the way that I phrase it. And because all of these catch-up mechanisms and mana dumps are really good, you know, if you start to stumble, your opponent just runs away with the game.
Yeah.
So instead, if you look at the catch-up mechanisms and you say, how can I invalidate what they're doing, as opposed to trying to do the same thing they're doing at them better than them, right? Like, my decision-making ability is not better than my opponent's uncontested Goldspan Dragon. You know? Like, I am not better than my opponent spending twice as much mana as me. You know, LSV is not better than that. Reed Duke's not better than that. So the idea that you'd want to be playing decks that primarily focus on your decisions being better than your opponent's decisions. Well, if you make decisions that deny your opponent's decisions, that's a place where you can get an advantage. But you can't rely on your decisions being better than your opponent's decisions with how good everybody is today. Right. And how good the decks are, and how fast the information travels.
Yeah, the information travels at light speed at this point, it feels like. Now, we're recording this on Saturday evening. This will be dropped on Monday, so the tournament's going to be over at this point. Do you have an idea what you're going to be playing tomorrow?
I'll be playing an identical version of the Sultai deck that I 6-0'd with.
Okay.
I played another satellite, and I 2-3'd one of the matches. I lost because of the disconnect. It happens. However, the big innovation that you see as far as flexibility goes, and I do think that flexibility matters because it allows you to wriggle your way out of some situations that your opponents normally would be able to deny you decision equity. So you do want decision equity in your deck. However, the decision equity that you want is at a point where whatever decisions you're making are going to invalidate what your opponent's doing. Or be a at least tempo neutral response to whatever their huge bomb is, because you really only need two things to consistently win Magic, and that is good mana to cast your spells, and then things that you're casting that leverage that tempo, whatever it is, right? And some people do that through efficiency of their cards, right? Like Fervent Champion, extremely efficient creature.
Yeah.
Uncommonly efficient creature. But, you know, again, spend all your mana every turn. Much better than relying on the efficiency of your cards when they can't punish you for wanting to have more lands. Lands are broken.
Lands do help you play your spells. I have come across that a few times. It's been pretty nice. I know, me personally, I'm probably locked where I'm playing Rogues tomorrow.
I think Rogues is a great deck.
I think it's a really good call because I like its percentage points against Sultai and Teamer.
Yeah,
and
I
that's
built my deck to
exactly
be better against Rogues.
Oh, it's a good call. It's a good call because the reason I'm playing Rogues is because I expect Sultai to be at good numbers tomorrow.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
I think there's good reason for it. I think the deck is starting to get tuned a little bit better than it was previously. It's figuring out the aggro matchups, and it's starting to push those out. And aggro getting pushed out actually benefits Rogues, where you could beat aggro with Rogues, but it's a difficult matchup.
Well, I think that you're 50-50 versus mono red, and you're a real dog to the mono white deck. Like, beating the Luris dog combo is basically impossible for Rogues.
It is definitely difficult, no doubt about that.
Well, I mean, you need, what, crippling fear, or whatever the wrath is?
Because my luck, I'm going to end up playing against Rogues 3 times. not rogues, but playing against aggro 3 times because I know
Yeah.
how it works for me. It happens every time. I try to pick up a tempo-y style deck like this. I'm actually gonna be playing. I'm playing 3. What is it? Crippling Fears or whatever in the sideboard. Because my main deck is already geared pretty well for Sultai matchups and stuff. I could actually focus my sideboard a little bit more on opposing creature decks than I normally would have been able to.
And that's another thing is you look at the ways that decks are trying to get these tempo advantages on their opponent. Like the red and white decks are trying to do it with uncommonly efficient and resilient threats. The rogues decks are trying to do it as like, I'm going to double spell every turn, and after we've traded a bunch of resources, I'm going to draw a bunch of cards, and I'm going to be able to continue spending mana because I drew a bunch of cards.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got, decks like the Yorion piles that are not ultimatum, and those decks are just playing like a collection of cards designed to trade, and then they have an 8 mana, like, I get to cast everything again. It's just Yorion is Shutterwalk from Hearthstone.
Oh, I don't know that reference at all. I've never played Hearthstone.
Oh, it copies all of the previous enters the battlefield triggers.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that card was part of an infinite combo, but
Those are always fun. Infinite
Yorion.
combos. We need more of those in life.
I mean, I don't hate them. I actually like deterministic win conditions that compress decision-making time periods, because I do think that, like, the idea that you can draw out of really bad spots is both attractive and abysmal for gameplay. If you, like, put your opponent on 1-outers and then they, luck stack and draw it, and it's like, well, I ran my opponent out of all of their resources and said that they had to draw one of 2 copies of a singular card in their deck, and they just happened to draw it. Like, when catch-up mechanisms are that good, and it goes from, like, you're gonna win to you are losing because your opponent who was out of cards now invalidated everything that you did, it's a rough place to be.
Yeah,
That's part of why Ultimatum is so good. It's like, well, I run you out of resources, and then my top decks are 7 mana for 14 mana worth of cards, as opposed to being, well, here's a 4 mana 6/6 that's 2 creatures.
No, that all makes sense.
But the other things about choosing which decks to play right now, I think that whatever you're doing, it's fine to play reactive cards, answers. However, it's not fine to play reactive cards without a proactive game plan. Like, Control has never been worse than it is now, as far as, like, actual hard control decks that try to answer everything that their opponent does and then spend more mana than them. You have to spend more mana than your opponent while you're answering their threats.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the days of playing Essence Scatter and Wraths are long since gone.
Yeah, I've tried the whole playing reactive control, and it hasn't gone well every time I've tried so far.
Right? Like, when you rely on your opponent to let you spend mana, that gives one of your important points of agency away.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. No doubt there.
Right. Instead of your opponent asking you, the control player, does their spell resolve, you're asking them, do I have the right to play Magic right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
Don't do it to yourself. Like, I looked at your green-black deck, Steven.
It was actually Larry's.
Well,
Larry
that was my green-black deck.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, we could talk about the green-black deck all day if you want. We can.
I mean, it does a lot of things that I think, highlight an understanding of what matters in the game, which is it provides a set of threats that are forcing to your opponent in the way that they have to interact with them, and if they do not follow that lead, they just kind of lose.
Yep.
You know, they don't call it Elder GG for nothing.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And
Now, to talk about that deck for a second, that deck was also in a thought that the meta was going to be way more aggressive than it turned out to be. That Sultai matchup was pretty much abysmal. And when I say that, the Sultai matchup felt good against bad Sultai players.
Yeah.
Every time we played against a good Sultai player, that matchup felt like it was unwinnable.
It was hard.
yeah, if you didn't get lucky and either Necromentia or Duress away the ultimatum before they could do anything,
Yep.
and even if you did, even if you got rid of the ultimatum, like, you're still losing on rate to everything that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah,
Because
I got
your
rid of the
cards do not
ultimatum and still
sufficiently pressure
lost.
them.
So, because like for example, I would like strip all of your ultimatums, right? They'd be like, all right, draw a card. Oh look, I drew Chariot.
Yep.
Slam it down.
Yeah, and unless you had Elder Gargaroth in play or Lovestruck Beast in
Right.
play, that Chariot was not only a brick wall to you, but something that meant that you were now on the back foot.
Yep.
Now, don't get me wrong. I actually had way more success against like Teamer, for example. Like I did really well against Teamer, and I think that was a benefit of having all that instant speed removal. Plus, I was playing like, for example, 1/1 Dead Touchers, followed like a couple of those followed by a Toski. They obviously don't want to trade down because they're like, oh, I don't want to trade my Lovestruck Beast down to your 1/1 Death Toucher. So I get a chip in and I draw a card. So I was just gaining advantage there until I was able to eventually just close it.
Yeah,
but against Sultai, they have this one spell that's letting them cast two spells essentially that I can't keep up with.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how many small creatures you have against the Sultai deck, they have an answer for that,
Mm-hmm.
right? The Teamer deck misunderstands an important thing about Magic right now, which is that if you're going to try to answer everything that your opponent is doing, your answers need to truly answer what they're presenting. And having a collection of counterspells and shocks and disperses does not a game-breaking control deck make. You know, if you are trying to 1-for-1 or like 1.5-for-1 with Bone Crusher Giant, if your opponent already drew a card, like in the case of other adventure piles, your opponent drew a card off of it with Edgewall Innkeeper or the Henge, that's not a favorable trade for you. I don't know why you would be interested in trying to create that gameplay for yourself.
Right.
And the same thing is true of, like, you had Murderous Riders. Alright, well, Murderous Rider is a 2-for-1. It's a 6-mana 2-for-1. But if your 3-mana answers your opponent's entire turn, and you got to do something else with your 3-mana that was left over, or your 2-mana that was left over, you're so far ahead there because your opponent, got caught up in the investment and risk part of games, which is really good and kind of on the back burner now. I think that investment and risk is what made Baneslayer a fun card to play with. But Baneslayer is not close to playable in Standard today. Like, there is a 5-mana dragon that is good in Standard. Baneslayer is not playable.
Yeah, I forget Baneslayer is legal, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, we
legal.
tried it. We did try it, and we tried playing 4 of them in Esper Doom to make our red matchup better, and we still lost.
Yep.
Because you're trying to interact on the wrong axis with them.
Yeah.
Like, the way that you catch up is to make things that were efficient for your opponent now be inefficient. Like, you don't interact efficiently with Lovestruck Beast usually because it leaves behind a token.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like a 5/5. well, how do you play cards that interact efficiently with Lovestruck Beast? You don't try to attack into it, you don't try to block it, and you play some sort of answer that costs about the same as Lovestruck Beast and generates value at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Nope, makes sense.
And it's what I call sort of the mana theory of Magic. Richard Garfield told everybody a lot when he wanted to originally name the game Mana Clash, because like broken engine cards, like we sometimes would refer to the Great Henge as an engine card, or Necropotence as an engine card, or Yawgmoth's Bargain, things like that, where it allows you to convert one resource into another resource very efficiently.
Right.
What resource universally in Magic can be translated into literally any other resource as a fundamental mechanic of the game?
Like, say that one more time for me.
Which resource in Magic, as a fundamental mechanic of the game, can be translated into any other resource in the game?
Mana.
Yeah, that's what I was
Mana.
thinking. Yeah,
Yep, mana.
I was like,
It turns out that by the process of casting spells, you are converting your mana into every other kind of resource that exists.
yeah, whether it being abilities, spells, so forth.
Yeah, permanents, spells, more mana in the case of investing in ramp or rituals. And that sort of inherent engine property of mana means that you should be trying to get as much mana expenditure as possible, because it's about how many resources you converted, because mana itself doesn't win you the game, but all the other kinds of resources can win you the game. Cards can win you the game, damage can win you the game, life can win you the game, permanence can win you the game, but mana itself does not. However, it's really hard to convert right? It's like a non-fungible token. It's like buying a gift card, right? Mana is money, and any other kind of thing that you invest your mana into is like a gift card. Now, you might be perfectly happy to spend that gift card wherever you're spending it, in which case it's as good as money. But there are a lot of times where, because you have to convert it into a less versatile resource, it's just bad. And that's where you get into problems of, like, I want to play quote-unquote good cards because they're efficient, and it's like, I point to Tarmogoyf. I don't think Tarmogoyf's a good creature in Modern right now, with the exception of maybe the deck that's playing, like, Temur Battle Rage is the Death Shadow deck.
Right, yeah. Was it like Jund Shadow at that point?
Yeah, because yeah, sure, it's a big creature for 2 mana, but you've converted it into a resource that you then have to convert into another resource.
Mm-hmm.
You should be looking for the most direct route to convert it into whatever goal you want. It's part of why Burn has, like, extra percentage points, because it requires a specific and narrow type of interaction from your opponent.
Very true.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a wrong threat, but there is a wrong answer. I would argue that if you know that there's a certain swath of answers being played, there are definitely suboptimal threats.
Mm-hmm.
I agree there.
And I know that this has been kind of like in head in the clouds, theory dense talk, but I think it matters, because it's the only way that you're going to consistently get edges in the format, because everybody is so good and everybody has access to the best deck list.
Mm-hmm.
Yup, and especially right now, in paper, sometimes somebody could want to play the best deck, but they didn't have access because, let's say, they can't afford the deck, right? That's not really a thing too much right now because of all our events being on Arena.
Yeah, or you've got access to through the Mythic Society, right? If you 4-0 one of their events and you're a Mythic Society subscriber, so you're paying whatever, like $6 for tournaments a week, which is a pretty normal amount that people would pay to go to FNMs. You're paying $6, you can play 24 tournaments a month, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you 4-0 one of them, you pay for the 800 ticket or 850 ticket Mana Traders account. And you can play whatever you want on Magic Online, basically, with that.
Mm-hmm.
So card availability is not a real thing. Also, people don't seem to have as much creation attachment in the digital environment. So people aren't running around with bad decks because they made them.
Yep.
And that's a big thing that I think people should look to get away from, is the idea that who made the deck is relevant in determining how good the deck actually is. Because again, if somebody who's an expert deck builder made a deck, yes, it's true that the deck is likely to be better than if you grabbed it from some random Magic Online user. But ultimately, you need to look at what the decks that you want to play are doing themselves and relative to the things that other people are doing. And, you know, if there's a meta that your mono white deck beats every deck except for the one that can put Ugin the Spirit Dragon into play on turn 5, beats every single deck, but that deck that plays Ugin the Spirit Dragon is really good against everything else. This was sort of when the mono red ramp deck came to prominence. I think it would be a valid strategy to play the mono white aggro deck and say, I would like the pairings board to be kind to me, and I'm just gonna win this matchup by avoiding it. And it's kind of flawed thinking to say, oh wow, look at how good this deck is because it has points of interaction, if the points of interaction are meaningless relative to the competition. It's the wrong answer thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, at least the aggro decks have something to say is like, well, if you don't do something, you're gonna die. Anytime that you're doing something that doesn't ask those kind of hard questions for your opponent, you had better have a very good reason to be doing so. And I don't care if it's Bozo the Clown or Sam Black who made your deck. If the questions that you're asking are bad relative to what's going on, it doesn't matter how quote-unquote well the deck was built, because other people got to make the same decisions that you did before you showed up to the table. And that's where you can get your advantages, is in your preparation and understanding the role that you need to be taking relative to what other people are doing.
Yep, I get that where you're coming from for that. I know, me personally, I don't really care what deck it is. I'm playing the deck that's going to give me my best chance of doing well that weekend or for that specific event. It's not really the term weekend anymore because of how Magic is at this current time. But when paper returns, which honestly, with the vaccines starting to be released, I don't know about everywhere else, but here in Michigan, vaccines are available to everybody starting in April 4th.
Here in Tennessee, we're rolling them out pretty quick, and we actually have some help from, I think it's the Colorado National Guard for some reason, in distributing vaccines.
Okay, that's I don't care who's distributing them as long as they're getting out. I know I personally got my first dosage last Wednesday. Steven's getting ready to get his wrapped underway. So, I know, and a lot of other people are getting theirs taken care of, which is awesome. This might be hope. I'm not expecting any opens or anything, but we might be able to start seeing little local store events. Like, I won't say soon, but more into the future closer than it was for like this whole pandemic.
I wouldn't put it out of the question to see online qualifier events for small groups. I'm talking 16 player or less, where, you know, if there's some sort of like world championship or Star City Players Championship equivalent type event where they have some big tournament series, and then they say, y'all get COVID tested, and then we'll isolate you and bring you to a small event, and they do it like a mini version of the arena PTs that they filmed in a television studio. I think we could see those come back a little bit sooner.
That is definitely a possibility. I personally am not going to anticipate an actual Open or GP this year. I'm not going to go and get my hopes up for nothing. But I could see, like, spring of next year, we might be able to see some Opens and GPs. Now, maybe we'll have some smaller events, which you said would be pretty sweet. I think that would be awesome. And that's all going to be... Good, they're going to be taking that day by day.
Or, you know, you might see Magic Online Championship type things, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that'd be cool. That'd be a good, nice little step in the right direction. I know music festivals are already getting ready to be kicking off this summer. So if that is a clear sign that we are getting in the right direction. And I am hopeful that come this time next year, we will be back going on the road, hitting up the convention center concession stands to keep it going after 12 hours because time ran long because of inverter mirrors. Obviously, it won't be inverter this time, but we'll figure it out.
Sultai mirrors.
No, it'll be done. Sultai will be out of the format by then. Remember, Icori and all that rotates in this fall.
I think that WotC will find it in their hearts to print more grindy blue, black, and green cards that will cause matches to go to time.
I am faithful that's going to be a thing. It is going to be quite unfortunate we never got to play with any of these sweet mutate cards or companions in standard. But we will definitely survive because we'll have some more sweet cards. But thankfully, we won't have to play hopefully we won't have to play another single game of standard paper Magic with Throne of Eldraine cards. Look at the positives. Except Oko. Oko was fun. Now that was a card. Man.
Oko was skill testing. I don't know if I would say that it was a play pattern that I would describe as novel or fun to be repeated en masse.
I don't know. Oko brought me a lot of fun.
It was very skill testing. I mean, Oko made me real happy. I qualified for the PT twice, beaten Oko.
Hell yeah. I didn't qualify for the PT with that. I qualified for my PT back in Phoenix with class by playing Dredge. So I wasn't degenerate.
I showed up with Jund food to a standard event where Oko was legal. Beat all the people playing Oko.
That's awesome.
I also showed up with Burn to a modern GP where, I don't know, probably 40% of the room was playing Oko. And I defeated every single Oko gamer who sat in front of me. Because it turns out that Goblin Guide into Eidolon of the Great Revel into Triple Bolt doesn't care how many food you have.
That's nice.
Would you like to pay 5 mana to get Skull Cracked, my friend? That would be a shame.
It definitely would be a shame. No, that's... Well, congrats on queuing during the Oko era. I know a lot of people were not as fortunate when...
It was not as kind to me as you'd think. I qualified twice for the same Pro Tour.
Oh, what the hell? That is brutal.
That is brutal.
That's Magic for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just happy to have had a good run.
No, you gotta be grateful for your good runs for sure. Um, Also, it's so weird to me that people that top 8 the Invitational don't get PT invites for Star
It's
City.
so weird to me that people unsafely, intentionally draw in the last round of the Invitational, causing me to have to not play my boy out or draw my boy out and lose in V top 8. That was heartbreaking.
What's that referred to?
So the envy that Steven top 8'd, I was 12-3 going into the last round.
Mm-hmm.
I was safe to draw in.
Mm.
Adam Franzi was not.
Oof.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
That's
Franzi
brutal.
was not
That
safe.
is brutal.
We drove together, and I looked at the tiebreaker board, and I said, he offered a draw to me, and I told him I can't in good conscience accept this draw
Yeah.
because I know that you will be out if you draw.
Yeah.
You are a
Which is
good
so
person for that.
I mean, Adam got second. I remember as soon as I lost that match, I said, damn, you had better win this thing, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that you do.
Hey, second place is still a really good finish in an
Second
Invitational.
place is a great finish.
Top
and,
8's a great finish in my opinion. Hell, I'm perfect. That's.
Dude, top
I remember,
64 in the Invitational.
I was gonna
That's
say
like,
being in a winning situation for the Invitational is a
Yeah.
good finish, and like nobody's. I'm just saying when there are people like talking like oh that like about top 8, I was like only 8 players out of these however many players are going to be in that position. Not everybody can be there for a reason. If that means you were close, I'm perfectly okay with that. You're not going to get the big one every time, but if you could keep. I'd rather be consistently close overall than getting one top 8 and then not even making day 2s for like a year.
Yeah, I mean, I would be willing to consider that a spiritual top 8. I did everything that I needed to do to top 8, and then I was a good person. I'm happy with myself for that. Because 12-3-1, I was offered a draw. I did everything that I put myself in a position where I was 100% to top 8, and I wouldn't do that to one of my friends.
Yeah.
If somebody who was being stupid and was unsafe to draw and didn't do the math, and they offered me to draw, sure. I mean, I will draw with you if you are insistent that if we draw, we're in. I don't have to correct you about the math because you're the one who told me that, well, we better draw. If you draw yourself out, that's you. I am not going to be the person who says yes to a draw and draws my best friend out.
Yeah.
No, I understand that. Like especially if I'm carpooling, because that's a little awkward too. Secondly,
I mean, we were the best car, dude. It was so wild. We drove to the Envy together. Adam got second. I got 12th. Then we drove to GP Columbus. Adam got second. I got 7th.
yo, I love GP Columbus.
2 weekends back to back.
Nice.
It was beautiful.
Yo, GP Columbus, soft spot in my heart. That's right, queued for the PT in the PTQ. Yep, love GP Columbus because that was the modern GP, right?
Yes, it was. I cried.
Oh, yeah.
I gave my boy Zero Joe the burn list that I had.
Okay.
He played a couple different sideboard cards, but he was given the big tech for the weekend, which was Phyrexian Revoker because it beat up on the Okos.
Mm-hmm.
And my lone loss on day 1 was a mirror to him because he had a deflecting palm in his sideboard because he was like, I think your deck's really good. I'm going to play a deflecting palm. Okay. And then my other 3 losses in that tournament, 2 in the Swiss and in the top 8, were to humans. The dreaded humans menace. I am so glad that humans stopped playing the card Charming Prince. So glad. There is nothing quite like your opponent playing a bear and gaining 3 life, and then playing a clone of the bear and doing it again.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
God, that sounds awful.
Yeah.
I played Burn like during all Hogak summer. I played Burn and was just consistently cashing GPs because I was beating up on Hogak decks. And I can only imagine how if I'm playing Burn and somebody's playing a 3/3 that gain 3 life every time. That's like whenever you're playing Burn and that people flip over Creeping Chills.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine if Creeping Chill had a body.
Yep.
Oh my god. Which Creeping Chill should be a creature.
Well, at least you can't Creeping Chill people in a way that creates problems in Pioneer anymore.
Yeah. That's
I don't
fair.
know. I would have been fine actually with Oops being nerfed instead of banned. I think that you could have just nerfed it by taking Silver Smoke Ghoul out of the format and saying you have to get all the creatures back at once. It's fine if you drain them for 12. It's fine if you get whatever 13 power worth of creatures and you put a menace trample threat in the graveyard.
Right.
That's all fine. You do not get the choice of those prized amalgams coming back at a time that your opponent couldn't anger the gods or wrath them away.
Right. I agree there.
That's my problem. Like I'm fine with you narc amoebaing to get it back. Like that's all cool. But Silver Smoke Ghoul creating a delayed trigger was just egregious.
Yeah. No, I get that. I understand that completely. Like I said, I know me some trickery stuff with prize amalgam. That's some modern shit right there. Pioneer don't need any of that.
I remember all sorts of prized amalgam trickery because my favorite standard deck of all time was Black Red Zombies that played uncastable prized amalgams.
Yep. Is that the one that played like the Scalbs or whatever they were called?
It played Crypt Breaker and Insolent Neonate and Key to the City to facilitate.
Oh, that deck.
Also 2 Lava or Lightning Axe, and then it played Haunted Deads and Scrap Heap Scroungers as creatures that kept coming back from the graveyard.
Oh yeah, those are fun times. See, the only deck I really played that had prize amalgams in standard was the Is It a Merge deck.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that deck was hot.
Elder Dank Fiend.
Elder D Fiend, man, I would be smacking people. I'd be like, at your upkeep, I got some fancy shit for you.
At your upkeep, did you want to cast spells this turn? That's unfortunate.
Oh, and then top 8, I'd look at their list, and they'd be like all like sorcery speed stuff. I was like, oh, my friend, you are in for a hurt today. Like,
I mean, that reminds me of like my favorite part of all these MTG Melee tournaments, and I know that it's like an integrity and anti-cheating measure primarily, but the fact that all of these tournaments are open deck list makes me so happy because I don't really care if you know what I'm doing, but if I know what you're doing, I feel like I can position myself far better than if we were just in the blind, and I think that it simulates closer to like a PT-like environment where you know what archetype your opponent's playing and you would know the spicy things because your team scouted.
Yep. I know. Hell, I did pretty well in a modern tournament when I was playing Boggles because I played mainboard Leyline of Sanctities, and against open deck lists, I'd be like, man, this hand is very medium, but it has Leyline Sanctity. What's my opponent on?
Yeah.
Huh. I'll keep this. I'll keep this and make it work.
I remember like MC London, the modern one, the Eli Loveman one, and I played Black White Taxes there. Word up. You know, I understand that you are addicted to Thraben Inspector, Stephen, but Black White has some slightly more powerful interactions.
Thraben Inspector
Not as
sucks
consistent,
anyway.
but certainly high power. And
now
open
Thraben
deck
Inspector's
lists
in
that
historic, which is nice.
What'd you say? What'd you say, Steven?
Oh, I said Thraben Inspector's in historic now, which is gas.
Still unplayable.
Oh, it
it's
is.
cool.
I mean, it's not great, but it's fun.
I would play Thraben Inspector if they put Voice of Resurgence in historic.
Oh God, I'd be in. But no,
But I mean,
you were talking about you were just
the
talking.
open deck list, they were beautiful because they can work both for you and against you.
Oh,
And
I
it's
agree.
about knowing what you're supposed to be doing and knowing what is worthwhile to play around or how to play around things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So my MC London deck had sideboard cards that were designed to be more difficult to play around than standard sideboard cards, like particularly in hate pieces. It was designed to create tension of how they were to be interacted with. For instance, I did not run Rest in Peace because I knew that people were like, "Oh, well, there are going to be Rest in Peace decks because the London Mulligan. I'm just going to put a bunch of Nature's Claims in my deck." I played stuff like Ravenous Trap and Kaya Orzhov Usurper as graveyard hate, and it's just like, all right, your interaction is not good against this.
You people and your Ravenous Traps, you know how annoying that freaking card is?
Yeah.
Why is that
Yeah.
not banned? Like, that card, that and Surgical should be banned. Like,
What about Archive Trap? That's my favorite way to beat Doomsday. Archive Trap.
Oh, I'm okay with Archive Trap. I've been Archive Trap a few times and I bring some Narcomoebas back, so it's all fine. You know, I accept Archive Trap as a legit Magic card. I'm a little biased if you couldn't tell. I'm very biased whenever we have Modern Talk.
Golgari Grave Troll.
Oh, should be unbanned along with looting.
I can agree with Grave Troll. I can't agree with looting.
Looting
I
didn't.
think
See, I'm going to say this every time it gets brought up. I will accept a looting unban if we can trade it for Creeping Chill. I will meet people in the middle.
I would far rather see if you're gonna unban looting and make Dredge real powerful again, like real powerful again.
How powerful would it really be if we lost Creeping Chill though? Come on.
Lightning Felix is pretty good, but like I would also want to see some of the other combos enabled by Faithless Looting nerfed at least.
So I thought Phoenix was a pretty fair deck.
I think that Phoenix has a play pattern that's not great. Like I would want Manamorphose to be banned if you were to unban Faithless Looting.
I can agree with that. Manamorphose is free mana, so if they're gonna, they should have already hit it since they were doing the Simian Spirit Guide stuff.
Yeah.
So honestly, Spirit Guide, Opal, and Manamorphose should have probably been all together. But you know that's
Free KCI. KCI can come back.
I guess in KCI don't have Opal. Is it really as good?
I mean, it does some things, but it requires you to play like more copies of Psy and probably play Emery, and at that point you're playing a slower like. Well, you're gonna play Urza and Emery, and you will play Mox Amber, but Mox Amber is far more conditional and requires you to play like real lands as opposed to lands designed to facilitate you playing like a real game of Magic, despite being a turn 2 combo deck.
Yeah, I agree there. I don't know. I never had a problem with KCI. I always built my deck and geared to have a decent matchup with it. Not saying I ever was favorable, but I'd at least have a decent time against them.
I mean, at least with KCI, you knew that your opponent was competent if they could do all of the loops, and that they knew what was going on, and that you weren't just like getting cheesed out because the cards were broke as a joke and required no maneuvering to play.
Yeah, I tried the have y'all ever used the little meta deck proxy cards where it's only text? Where it's only text. I never played KCI a day in my life, and I tried to play test KCI with those. Oh, buddy. Talk about a hard day at the office.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That was how I learned the vintage format, is we had 2 meta deck vintage decks, and we played them at GPs.
Nice. Yeah, I used to do that for Modern and Legacy, especially Legacy when I was getting ready for Niagara a couple years ago. Trying to play against every day because I had no idea the Legacy format to save my life. It was a cool thing, but now I just like print out full proxy cards. It's a good time.
I mean, I like I still like the meta deck model. It's yeah, the full proxies. I'm not a huge fan of like wasting a bunch of paper, and similarly, I like to know what the cards do when I hear them, so that I don't have to constantly like be reading cards during matches and lose my train of thought.
Nope, understandable completely. The last thing, 'cause I want to ask is, we do this in a review. We do want to thank you for coming on. Well, ran longer than we were planned for originally, but you know, we had a lot to talk about. I may want to make sure we could talk about all your success you've been having over the last month. Starting with that 7-2, I don't know if you had any before that, but the 7-2 is what really caught my eye, and then this week especially, you've been crushing it. You've just been taking wins from people like candy from a baby, as they say.
I mean, I was giving away some wins in the sealed qualifier this morning. But,
Oh, so
yeah.
you gave them back. It's cool. You know, you're fair.
Yeah.
Fair and balanced. No, well, good luck tomorrow. Hopefully we can dodge each other.
Good luck to you as well. I mean, there's one surefire way. I don't want to, suggest anything, but I do have 2 buys. If you have to take a loss somewhere during your day, if you take it in round 1 or 2, might make for an easier tournament for you. And also, we would not be in the same bracket.
True. Here's what's going to happen, right? You're going to have your buys. You're going to have your buys. After round 3, you're going to be 2-1, and I'll be 3-0 at that point, and then we'll avoid each other that way as well. See? And then we'll see each other in the top 8. See, that seems like a win-win.
Bases covered.
Yeah, either way.
Right.
Either way.
Yeah, you can't Brad Nelson it. Because my favorite story about, like, random tournament records is Brad Nelson at the Shards Valara block PT was playing this deck designed to just beat every control deck. And in round 1, he got paired against a control deck. Super lucky. He smashes the guy. He's attacking for lethal when he looks at his opponent and says, "Would you like to agree to a draw?" His opponent obviously gladly accepts the draw.
Oh, that's actually pretty
At
good.
which point, in this constructed only event, Brad was placed into the draw bracket where all of these control piles would be, and he proceeded to 8-0 the rest of the day.
Yeah, that's nice.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Like, that's just good magic.
Yep.
Like,
It's that kind of outside the box problem solving that I hope more people apply to Magic.
Hell,
So they just cry that they should ban everything.
oh, well, you don't have to talk to me about how I'm very anti-bans. But I will say, I've actually conceded to an opponent so we didn't take a draw because I knew I couldn't beat control decks.
Oh, I've done that many times.
Oh, yeah, because if I'm in
But
that
most of it
control
because I,
bracket...
dislike unintentional draws.
Yeah.
I feel like trying to play for an unintentional draw is kind of a below the bar thing to do, where you're like playing for a draw, particularly if you're slow playing and stalling, particularly if you're like trying to gate the line.
If you're stalling, that's cheating. I'm not gonna change my opinion. Stalling is
it's cheating, but it's really hard to get called.
I know.
What is a reasonable amount of time? I'm sorry, if you have no real plays in your hand, and you're like looking at my board over and over again, you are deserving of a match loss.
Yeah, I don't think they give enough slow play warnings personally in paper.
Oh, not at all. I mean,
that's
part of
something I
that's
think
what-
judges don't get hard enough on that.
Yeah, chess clocks don't work, but certainly I think if we could have community standards that like required people to know the cards that they're playing and know the cards that other people are playing so that they can play at a reasonable pace.
Yeah, a
It
good
would
portion
really
is
save everybody a
reading.
lot of a headache and make sure that everybody's able to actually get dinner at a reasonable time.
Yeah, I give up on that dream. But before we get off here, I want to ask you the last question I always ask everyone while we have them on is, um, if you could go ahead and make a Mount Rushmore of your top four Magic cards of all time, what would be on your Mount Rushmore?
Are we talking like greatest Magic cards of all time, or my
just-
favorite Magic cards of all time?
Just the four cards, whether you think they're the most iconic, best, your favorite, whatever you would put on the Mount Rushmore of Magic for four Magic cards.
That's a really good question. I think I'm gonna go with iconic cards,
Okay?
and obviously Black Lotus, Lightning Bolt, Tarmogoyf, and Swords to Plowshares.
Okay.
Okay. None of those cards say Dredge, so your answer's wrong. But no, those are all very good cards. Swords annoys me because I tried playing Death Shadow and Legacy, and that card made me sad.
Well, like, I think that those cards are emblematic of
I agree.
interactions that people would describe to be magic. That they when they think about magic, those are the kinds of things that spring to mind.
Yeah, like when I think of the Magic the Gathering, one of the first words that comes to my mind is Lotus. You know, Lotus is because Black Lotus is like isn't it the most expensive Magic card? For example, like how can you? There's reasons for it. Like it is an iconic card. And then Lightning Bolt is probably come on now, it's Lightning Bolt.
Yeah.
One of the greatest Magic cards ever.
Mention to somebody who doesn't play Magic, and they could probably wager a good guess as to what it does.
Mm-hmm. And in addition to it, the card gives you reach in so many matchups. Like it's just so good. Then the others, like all those cards are really good, and that's a quality Mount Rushmore. Like I said, it would have been probably a god level Mount Rushmore if you would have threw any cards that said Dredge on there, but we won't hold it.
Larry's Mount Rushmore. Grave Troll. All right, let's think for a second. Grave Troll, Bazaar. I mean, you're not a vintage Dredge player.
I wouldn't name Bazaar because that's too easy, Dredge. I like Dredge that you do have to work for a little bit. Like,
okay,
come on now, let's
so
at least work for it.
Arctic Union, Faithless Looting, and Prized Amalgam.
Yeah, Prize Amalgam, Faithless Looting. I'd put Narcomoeba, and then I think Ox has joined the group because that card is just like put that deck over the hill for me. And it's a little again low bias because that card is what sent me to the PT. So gonna be a little biased towards it. But no, Chase. All jokes aside, we do thank you for coming back on. We always like talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully, if anybody has any, sort of theory questions, they're more than welcome to reach out and ask me about, the kind of stuff that I was talking about. And I really appreciate the kind of show that you put on and putting up with me wanting to talk about an archetype that's only good because it gives you a mana advantage by playing bad cards, but it's only good because of the mana advantage.
That's just fun magic right there. But yeah, we'll definitely put your Twitter handle in the YouTube description and send all the love your way that we get. But again, thank you so much, Chase, for coming on, and good luck tomorrow.
Thank you. You as well.
Good luck, dude.
All right, we'll catch you later, my friend.